And good evening, everybody. It is Thursday, the 23rd of March, 2017. Thanks for joining me once again. Fortunately, the weather is improving here in the Northeast, and even though it's cold right now, we're expecting a pretty nice weekend, and I'm very happy about that. The reason why I'm talking to all of you this evening is I wanted to talk about the death and afterlife of TV news. I have some inside track on the way the industry works because I worked as a video journalist for a period about 7 years, and I worked in two markets in Miami and the Washington, D.C. market. So my primary role was that of a camera person. And essentially, I would go out and shoot the news stories with the reporters and then edit them, and also, for the most part, run the microwave truck. There's a lot of attention now on the media with the new presidential administration in the White House, and it seems like a lot of folks are kind of going along with that idea that the media is unreliable. Fake news is the big word here. And it's interesting to see how a lot more information is coming out about what goes on behind the scenes in these news organizations. My experience is primarily from the local TV news market. As most people probably know, you have the big networks such as CBS, NBC, Fox, and you also have ABC, and they have their newscasts to go along with their programming, and they do the TV news. And this is the national network news, basically all the stories happening around the world. Also, with that, you have local news stations who put their focus on the local day-to-day news, and they do broadcasts in the morning, in the middle of the day, and the evening time. Some of these newscasts run 24/7. Others just generally do a morning show from like 5 o'clock in the morning to 7, and then they do like a noon for a half hour, 4 to 6 p.m., and then usually like a 11 o'clock show, which is usually like the most important newscast is the 11. That's when pretty much everybody is winding their day down and they're just trying to figure out what to expect from the next day coming. So I have done a lot of work out there in the field, and I just wanted to present some viewpoints and some thoughts as someone who has worked in that industry and has quite a bit of experience in doing this kind of work. Yes, I think the TV news industry is dying. It is dying a slow, rotten corpse zombie death, and it's pretty darn ugly, and I've seen that for from the beginning when I first entered that particular industry in 2007. 2007 is when I got my first news job. And the big problem, I mean, the root of it all, the reason why you see news going in the way that it is going, is it really just comes down to the money. When I started in Miami, I worked for one of the Spanish language networks, and basically it was the local affiliate for that network. It was all the stories happening in South Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Palm Beach County. Got my first job working as a part-time cameraman in Miami. I was expected to shoot and edit the news stories as well as operate the microwave truck equipment. Now, an interesting thing about that is in the beginning of the industry back in the day, usually the person running the microwave truck will be a separate person. You would have an engineer. Of course, with cutbacks, you have news organizations having a cutback on personnel, and they've got to ask the crews to multitask. So basically, I'm trying to shoot and edit the story, but I'm also trying to set up the antenna, make sure I got a good microwave signal back to the station, run cables, set up lights, all those things, and still make these intense deadlines. Oftentimes, if we get dispatched to a breaking news story, once we get there, we may have, I don't know, maybe like 20, 25 minutes to put together a story. So it's a really, really intense industry. You have to be quick on your feet, and you've got to think critically. And especially as the person working behind the camera dealing with all the technical issues, there's a lot of stuff that happens. Cameras break, they overheat. The microwave trucks have, I swear they're self-aware, because they always seem to glitch at the most inopportune moment. You're about to go live, and all of a sudden, like, I don't know, the wind just gets a little funny and some dust blows somewhere, and it manages to hit part of a cable, and the next thing you know, you got nothing. Also, the biggest offender for me were the earpieces. They're called IFBs, and I'm trying to think if I actually remember what that acronym meant. I don't think I ever asked anybody, but basically, it's like a cell phone that's attached to the microwave truck, and you call the station. You have two-way communications in that earpiece. Those things suck. The earpiece always wants to fall out, and it's always a problem dealing with things like reception. There's an issue back at the station; you can't quite hear them. So the microwave truck is having a problem. So the reporter actually has to call on their cell phone, put the IFB on speakerphone, and then wait to hear the director's instructions to start talking. And if you pay attention to some of these newscasts, you'll actually hear someone say cue or hey, you're live, you're on in the background on the phone before the reporter starts talking. I always get a kick out of that. That's just kind of like a summary of some of the issues that you could deal with, and you're still trying to put a story together visually, and still you are expected to be creative and artistic in some manner. I ran into a lot of challenges, but I was able to improve my skills to a point where I got really fast and I was able to edit pieces together quickly and get the job done. I got in at the time that the industry was moving to an all digital platform, meaning basically the acquisition, the cameras themselves. For many, many years, it started out as film back in the very, very early days. And then it progressed to analog video, then digital video, then high definition. I never really got to experience the good old days where there were more people working in the field. If you were part of a news crew, you had a sound person with you, you had a lighting person with you, usually had a field producer to help the reporter coordinate things because there's so much going on in the news story. A reporter has to write their script. They also got to coordinate with the assignment desk. It's basically like the air traffic control for the news TV people. They basically coordinate things, taking in calls, getting tips, telling crews where to go, talking with producers, trying to figure out the order that everything needs to come on, what stories come on first, what comes on second, or if a story gets cut. So coordinating with the assignment desk and then telling the camera person, me, where the interview should go, what the general assembly is going to be of that story for that particular day, or newscast actually, because you're usually cutting several stories in one day now. It's pretty stressful. The thing that I noticed was that with the advent of the digital technology, where it wasn't like analog, where you had to really have more people working on something, with the digital technology, what happened was a lot of the cameras had better audio. They also had better contrast, and there was basically more ease as far as just doing basic electronic acquisition. So if you're shooting, you have a pretty good preamp in the camera. You could plug a microphone straight into the camera instead of having to go into a mixer. So anytime you had new technology come out, typically what happens is you lose a body. And while the technology is great, there's no substitute for having a team of people there to work on a story and really make something really, really look and sound great. At the time that I got into the business, the internet was starting to come about. So I'm pretty sure most folks know that the internet came about like in the late 90s and started to become more popular. And as the internet became more popular, people started getting their news from other sources. They were no longer just sticking to tuning into the TV at the same time each night to hear about what happened that day, what the weather's going to be, sports, things of that nature. The issue that came up with that was that these TV stations were starting to lose advertising revenue. A lot of those businesses that used to always buy TV ads were starting to advertise online. They would maybe start their own website and direct traffic there, or they will have social media. Businesses would be on Facebook and Twitter and all that. And essentially, all those advertising dollars started to just disappear. TV production is really, really expensive. There is a lot of expensive equipment that needs to work right and be in good repair for everything to run smooth and for a newscast to go on live for everybody to watch. And as these budgets of these local TV news stations began to plummet, they had to cut back on people, less reporters, less field producers, less, pretty much everything. And still expected to put on several hours of news content every day. So I definitely noticed that it was quite frustrating for me. And I really questioned my decision to do this kind of job, even though the process of going out there and telling a story and putting it together to be shown on TV is still an incredible experience. I missed out on the good old days, so I guess, that's what it is. At the same time this was happening, the cable news networks were becoming more popular in the sense that like Fox News came around and it was really becoming popular because it presented the more conservative view. And what you started to see, instead of people telling the news, a lot of those big cable networks were just doing commentary. They weren't saying that Billy got bit by the dog on First Street today. They were saying, well, the problem with these dogs is that blah, blah, blah. And oh, pit bulls are bad. And, why are the parents not around? What happened to the parents? And we bring an expert to talk about that. And it really, on the cable news networks, and this is especially true today, if you tune in, you really don't get a whole lot of news. What you get is commentary about the news. They'll mention a headline and then they'll give opinions from hopefully multiple sides of that spectrum, whether it's conservative or liberal, what have you. And the good thing about local TV was that you were still going on to the field, actually talking to people and putting stories together in the field instead of just doing a remote where you're talking to the anchor back at the TV station and you're in a little box, one of maybe four or five, and then you basically have to try to squeeze in amongst all the chatter to get your point across. I don't think that's necessarily what the news should be doing. I know commentary is one part of it, but when it's just the whole entire product, the storytelling gets lost. As I continued to work in the industry and I eventually made my way into Washington, D.C. to work at a local news station there, I noticed that cuts were still happening. The station that I worked at had just finished firing many of their longtime anchors, and it was basically just leading out of the economic downturn, the Great Recession, where these stations were bleeding money and they had to do whatever they had to do. So they cut from the top. So all the longtime experienced people got cut. Some major longtime anchors got canned. And what happened? This is pretty sad. Is that they went to my old station's competitors. Whenever a news anchor goes to another station, the audience follows, the fans follows. Not only that, one thing that's really important to be a good journalist is having the right contacts, the right connections, and so those connections, be it in the police. Law enforcement, fire department, city council people, mayors, things of that nature, you lose those contacts when that person leaves. So ratings fell for this station that I used to work at. And when they were number one for many, many years, they went all the way to dead last. The station was the last place station, and I think even to this day, it's still having a hard time. It's pretty tough. With that, those lost in ratings comes more loss in ad revenue, which the news stations are already losing because of the internet. So again, more layoffs, less people to do the job. Instead of having a team of 6 to 7 crews during the daytime, you maybe have only three. And there was actually times in the station I used to work at where they only had one reporter for the night crew. And again, we're talking about the 11 p.m. newscasts, which many people who are real experts would say those are the most important newscasts. Like, you have to win during those time slots, especially if you have a good lead-in. And what a lead-in is a show, a TV show like a drama or something like that, that leads into the newscast. So if it's a real popular show, a lot of people are interested in the show, and then, okay, now I'm going to watch the news. Well, what was happening, and this is something that happens when your newscast is not good and you don't have the right people, especially the right anchors, longtime anchors that are trusted by the community. Once that TV show ends, the audience clicks to another TV station to get their news. So, and it's just this downward spiral that just keeps, and it's still going on right now. Local news stations are really having a hard time. And I'd say the big news network stations like CBS, ABC, etc., I still think they're doing okay. I think they're holding on, But the local TV is really, really having a hard time. And just like when it comes to politics, local politics affects you in a greater degree than the national big picture politics. And I think this is something that is very similar to the TV news industry in that, yeah, when you tune into CBS nightly news, you're going to find out about a terrorist attack that happened across the pond. While it's disturbing, it's really not going to affect you. But if you live in a certain neighborhood and that neighborhood is experiencing a really bad crime wave of vehicle break-ins, you want to know about that. And it's the local news crew that's going to give you that information. So the harder it is for those folks to have the resources they need to get the job done because they're not making any money. Media outlets, media companies are consolidating. They're buying out stations because it's just impossible to keep up with the expense of doing a newscast when you're not making any money. They're really trying to keep it going. It's just getting harder and harder. And the problem is that you're not going to have that local flavor. You're not going to have the know how from that reporter who's lived in this community for 30 years, who knows everybody. You really need to get that kind of information because it is important for you to know what's happening around your community. The thing is, it's not profitable to do real news. You're actually better off probably just doing commentary and then just, giving your personal view on things and causing controversy. It's really disturbing. Being a news cameraman it's definitely one of the most important jobs I've ever had. I would say the most important next to being an enlisted airman in the United States Air Force. So and it's a close second, like neck and neck. I've seen some wild stuff, man. I've watched the guy bleeding out on the ground because he got shot. I've seen some bodies. I've seen lots of fires. I've seen lots of police tape. You see that a lot as a camera person in the TV news, and you film it too. Uh, I still dream about police tape to this day. It definitely had a real big effect on me. It allowed me to see more of real humanity, the good and the bad. And I would have never seen any of those things if I never did this job. So I'm really grateful for that experience. I'm not in the industry anymore. I currently am not working as a news photographer, even though I would love to do it. I just think that it's just continuously becoming harder and harder for people who do the news to be able to do it and have the time to really bring a story together and also have support from their management and the rest of the team. In the TV news industry, and this is local TV, I don't really have an experience in national TV, but in the local TV industry, there's always this dividing line between the people who work in the field, the news reporters, the truck operators, if you still got them, the camera people, and the editors. And then there are the people who are inside the TV station, news directors, executive producers, news producers, those kinds of people, the anchors. So there's always this division. And I always felt like, as the person in the field, we never really got the support from the folks who were inside the TV station, who were always in air conditioning and warm heat and all that. A lot of producers nowadays are just nothing more than showrunners, where basically they're just filling out a rundown of what they think the news should be on that given day, coordinating that with the assignment desk. And it just feels like they're just babysitting a newscast because a lot of stuff is just, I don't know, I guess like just automated, meaning that there's a formula that they do every day. So in the TV news industry, the first thing that happens during the daytime is that they have the editorial meeting. It's called a morning meeting, news meeting. It has a couple different phrases. And a lot of times, and I've been to a couple, what happens is they just pick up the local newspapers, and that's how they figure out what they're going to do that day for news. Oh, okay, so Washington Post had a story about the mayor, so we're going to go ask the mayor about what happened. That's not news gathering. That's not going out and really finding stories. Basically, you're just being spoon-fed your story for the day. And I've seen reporters come up with these really original ideas, and because it's not the formula, in other words, like the producer just doesn't even want to hear it. They just want you to do like the average story that all the other stations are doing. So if you ever tune into the news at 5 o'clock, chances are you're going to see a reporter at the same place at the same time talking about the same thing, saying the same damn thing as the other stations. It's like basically you're clicking the different stations and it's the same darn thing. A lot of stations are trying to do some things that, I worked at an investigative unit at my last TV news station, and they were trying to do more long form stories. But the problem with doing that and just working on a story without actually putting it on TV is that that's expensive. For example, if I'm working on a story and not actually airing it for a week, that's a week that they don't have a body to watch to respond to a breaking news story. And what will happen is we'll be working on these bigger stories, really original content that not only informs people but also potentially can help people make decisions. And what will happen is we would just get jerked into a generic story about a bear in a backyard or something that you could just get by just pulling a video from a cell phone from the person who lived there. Like, it really doesn't take a lot of skill to just put that on TV and let the anchor read the script for that. I was trying to fight to do original content, to make great content. And although I did do some day by day, month by month, it just became harder to be able to do that and then feed the beast at the same time. The beast is this big, enormous monster that wants potato chips all the time. It doesn't matter what it gets; it just needs more, and more, and more, and more. Quantity over quality for sure. So any news director or executive that's probably hearing this will probably come up with the argument, well, you got to keep the lights on, you got to pay the bills, newscasts cost money, and blood and guts sells. If it bleeds, it leads. I'm pretty sure folks have heard that. They'll always do, even if it's not a great story, if they just mention person got shot or stabbed or there was a fire someplace, even if it's not anything big, they'll prioritize over that or over maybe an investigative story about illegal towing, for example. There's companies that will tow you illegally, and a lot of times they get away with it, and it's not fair. And that's why you need someone to actually work that story for a period of time and be able to really work that, get all the different sources and everything like that. So yeah, those are the things that I ran into that really frustrated me on a personal level. And the other real big thing is that the newscasts have gotten sloppy. They've gotten really sloppy. Misspelling names on TV. The big one is for that crash that happened in out in the West Coast. Some Ting Wong, We Too Low, Holy FUK, Holy Fork, Bang Ding Ow. Yeah, so basically, a producer looked at that and thought that was okay to put on the TV screen. One thing that's happening with the lack of funds, the loss of advertising revenue to the online media outlets, is that experienced people aren't able to be there anymore. You're bringing along folks just coming out of college who don't have a lot of experience, and they turn you into a producer and because they don't have enough bodies, or someone who usually needs to kind of pay their dues as an intern for a while may just get pushed into the field as a reporter because they're attractive, even though they don't have that judgment that comes from years of experience. Now, we would have those folks out there in the field with those years of experience if they weren't getting pushed out to save money. So you're cutting from the top and you're eliminating the folks that you really, really need to lead the charge. And you're left with a bunch of kids that really don't know what they're doing, who don't understand good news judgment. They don't know how to get ahead of a story. They're just kind of like reacting. They're not being proactive. And that's why you see a lot of news reporters going the direction of doing public affairs, which I call the dark side, but that's a story for another day. But yeah, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing a lot of folks just getting out of the news industry if they're not being forced out. A lot of long time experienced technicians, such as the photographers who've been around for a while, the truck engineers, the people who really know how to run the station and make things work. Yeah, everything's going in the path of automation, which is fine. The problem is that when you have a visual medium that requires abstract thought, in other words, being able to think outside the box, and you lose that And to do creative storytelling, you really need to be creative and you got to be good at what you do. And that takes time. It takes experience. And sadly, I'm seeing the quality being compromised for the sake of quantity. The news cycles for these local stations are starting to get longer and longer, and I'm really not sure what the solution is. Obviously, there's still going to be news. I mean, people need to watch the weather and everything like that and get some news, but for the most part, I think most Americans live in their own bubble. I do not watch a lot of news. I get some news from my social media feeds, and that's about it. The important stuff I'll kind of pick out and follow up and maybe watch something online, but it's as far as TV news, I used to watch a lot of news during when I was in college back in the early 2000s. Like I watched local news all the time, and now it's not necessary anymore. Even if weather is what I'm looking for, all I got to do is turn on the app of my phone or maybe just tune into weather.gov. I'm going to actually put that as a link in the description because another subject that I'm going to be talking about is how can you be a news consumer and get the right news in this new day and age where there really isn't quality news anymore. I don't think the media by and large is fake or malicious or anything like that. It's just they can't keep up. The internet's taking all the money. I don't know where the money is going, but it's gone. It's gonna continue to be more difficult and more difficult for the folks who are getting into this industry now to really have long-term success and become ingrained within a community and be that TV news anchor man or woman. And I think we need that. I think we need storytellers, and that's something that journalists do. They tell stories and they go after the bad guys. And when there's only a couple of people during the day and then maybe one person at night to cover the news, things get lost. The important little details get lost. The good news is that there are a lot of citizen journalists out there. There are online media organizations. The problem for folks like me who've been doing it a while, us old fucks, I guess, is that we would probably be considered overqualified to do a lot of those jobs. Because from what I've been hearing, and I haven't done any research on any of the data. I'll probably do that at some point. The online media outlets don't pay very well. And it's probably because the advertising revenue is different. Advertising on the internet is cheaper than, putting ads on TV. And it's probably more effective at this point, which is absolutely crazy. And I hope it improves. I hope that at some point things can get figured out where folks could get paid well to do the news again and do and be and be in the industry for a long time and work in the community for a long time, get the trust of the local big shots like government officials. You need that. You need to have those levels of trust because when you're allowed to get the inside track on things, that's when you get those really significant stories. Stories like the Watergate scandal. Things like that. You need someone with that reporter nose kind of digging around, and if they don't have the motivation to do that, I mean, passion is great. Being passionate about something is great. But man, that's a tough way to make a living. So you really should be getting paid for it. If you're a news reporter, if you're a camera person, and you're out there not in the studio, sitting pretty on a desk, filling out a rundown like I see a lot of folks doing. They're just, desk jockeys. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about hitting the pavement, talking to people, and getting those details. If you do that, you should be compensated well for it. And my heart bleeds to you, man. I wish I could go back, but I don't want to deal with the drama anymore. And it's just going to become more difficult as time goes along. I have a lot more to say on this subject, but I'm going to go ahead and do some follow-up clips for that. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope that this information gives you an idea of what's happening with the news industry. And in the future, we'll have a conversation about how you as a consumer of the news can get the most out of the different options for TV news media today. Thank you, everybody, and have a good night. Bye-bye.